Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through verse 1 through chapter 3, verse 3. When David was close to death, he told Solomon his son, "I am about to die. Be strong and become a man. Do the job the Lord your God has assigned you by following his instructions and obeying his rules, commandments, regulations, and laws as written in the law of Moses. Then you will succeed in all you do and seek to accomplish. And the Lord will fulfill his promise to me, if your descendants watch their step and live faithfully in my presence with all their heart and being. Then, he promised, you will not fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. You know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, how he murdered 2 commanders of the Israelite armies, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. During peacetime, he struck them down like he would in battle. When he shed their blood, as if in battle, he stained his own belt and the sandals on his feet. Do to him what you think is appropriate, but don't let him live long and die a peaceful death. Treat fairly the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, and provide for their needs, because they helped me when I had to flee from your brother Absalom. Note well, you still have to contend with Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Bahurim, who tried to call down upon me a horrible judgment when I went to Mahanaim. He came down and met me at the Jordan, and I solemnly promised him by the Lord, I will not strike you down with the sword. But now don't treat him as if he were innocent. You are a wise man, and you know how to handle him. Make sure he has a bloody death." Then David passed away and was buried in the city of David. David reigned over Israel 40 years. He reigned in Hebron 7 years, and in Jerusalem 33 years. Solomon sat on his father David's throne, and his royal authority was firmly solidified. Haggith's son Adonijah visited Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She asked, "Do you come in peace?" He answered yes. He added, "I have something to say to you." She replied, "Speak." He said, "You know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel considered me king. But then the kingdom was given to my brother, for the Lord decided it should be his. Now I'd like to ask for just one thing. Please don't refuse me." She said, "Go ahead and ask." He said, "Please ask King Solomon if he would give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as a wife, for he won't refuse you." Bathsheba replied, "That's fine, I'll speak to the king on your behalf." So Bathsheba visited King Solomon to speak to him on Adonijah's behalf. The king got up to greet her, bowed to her, and then sat on his throne. He ordered a throne to be brought for the king's mother, and she sat at his right hand. She said, "I would like to ask you for just one small favor. Please don't refuse me." He said, "Go ahead and ask, my mother, for I would not refuse you." She said, "Allow Abishag the Shunammite to be given to your brother Adonijah as a wife." King Solomon answered his mother, "Why just request Abishag the Shunammite for him? Since he is my older brother, you should also request the kingdom for him, for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab, son of Zeruiah." King Solomon then swore on oath by the Lord, "May God judge me severely if Adonijah does not pay for this request with his life. Now as certainly as the Lord lives, he who has made me secure, allowed me to sit on my father David's throne, and established a dynasty for me as he promised, Adonijah will be executed today." King Solomon then sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he killed Adonijah. The king then told Abiathar the priest, "Go back to your property in Anatoth. You deserve to die, but today I will not kill you, because you did carry the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David, and you suffered with my father through all his difficult times." Solomon dismissed Abiathar from his position as priest of the Lord, fulfilling the decree of judgment the Lord made in Shiloh against the family of Eli. When the news reached Joab, for Joab had supported Adonijah, although he had not supported Absalom, he ran to the tent of the Lord and grabbed hold of the horns of the altar. When King Solomon heard that Joab had run to the tent of the Lord and was right there beside the altar, he ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, "Go strike him down." When Benaiah arrived at the tent of the Lord, he said to him, "The king says, 'Come out.' But he replied, 'No, I will die here.' So Benaiah sent word to the king and reported Joab's reply. The king told him, 'Do as he said. Strike him down and bury him. Take away from me and from my father's family the guilt of Joab's murderous, bloody deeds. May the Lord punish him for the blood he shed. Behind my father David's back, he struck down and murdered with the sword 2 men who were more innocent and morally upright than he, Abner son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa son of Jether, commander of Judah's army. May Joab and his descendants be perpetually guilty of their shed blood, but may the Lord give perpetual peace to David, his descendants, his family, and his dynasty.' So Benaiah son of Jehoiada went up and executed Joab. He was buried at his home in the wilderness. The king appointed Benaiah son of Jehoiada to take his place at the head of the army, and the king appointed Zadok the priest to take Abiathar's place. Next the king summoned Shimei and told him, 'Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but you may not leave there to go anywhere. If you ever do leave and cross the Kidron Valley, know for sure that you will certainly die. You will be responsible for your own death.' Shimei said to the king, 'My master the king's proposal is acceptable. Your servant will do as you say.' So Shimei lived in Jerusalem for a long time. 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's servants ran away to King Achish, son of Maacah of Gath. Shimei was told, 'Look, your servants are in Gath.' So Shimei got up, saddled his donkey, and went to Achish at Gath to find his servants. Shimei went and brought back his servants from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and then returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, 'You will recall that I made you take an oath by the Lord, and I solemnly warned you, if you ever leave and go anywhere, know for sure that you will certainly die. You said to me, the proposal is acceptable. I agree to it. Why then have you broken the oath you made before the Lord and disobeyed the order I gave you?' Then the king said to Shimei, 'You are well aware of the way you mistreated my father David. The Lord will punish you for what you did. But King Solomon will be empowered, and David's dynasty will endure permanently before the Lord.' The king then gave the order to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, who went and executed Shimei. So Solomon took firm control of the kingdom. Solomon made an alliance by marriage with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He married Pharaoh's daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he could finish building his residence and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. Now the people were offering sacrifices at the high places, because in those days the temple had not yet been built to honor the Lord. Solomon demonstrated his loyalty to the Lord by following the practices of his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. So here you have Solomon, David's son, assuming the throne of his father David. David advises Solomon on what he should do here. First saying that the Lord promised him a perpetual dynasty as long as David's descendants watch their step and live faithfully in my presence with all their heart and being. So David admonished Solomon to fulfill that and to watch his step. He then brings up a couple of instances that Solomon should address here. Joab, son of Zeruiah, who was commander of the army for David for many years, but murdered 2 men, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. And despite this, David still kept him in power. So, Joab was a man who wasn't lacking in zeal for David and his throne, but he wouldn't necessarily listen to what David had to say, or about David's decided course in things, and was more swift to shed blood. But David never punished him during his lifetime. But Solomon rectifies this. Also following this, he admonishes him to treat the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, well, and to also deal shrewdly with Shimei, son of Gera, who, when Absalom took the throne from David, essentially taunted David and called down curses on him when he was fleeing. But David swore essentially that he wouldn't harm him. Yeah, so following that, David passed away. And then Adonijah came in to Bathsheba and asked him for, who was it? Abishai, was it? Abishag, the Shunammite. Now, Abishag was talked about in, I think the first chapter of Kings here. She was the king's nurse, essentially, and a concubine for the king in his old age, who was supposed to keep the king warm. Adonijah here is making a play for the throne, and he hints at it too here in verse 15. You know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel considered me king, but then the kingdom was given to my brother, for the Lord decided it should be his. Now I'd like to ask for this one thing, this small thing, don't refuse me type thing. And he asks for the king's concubine, which, as I understand it, taking the king's stuff and using it as your own is a way of symbolizing that you're the king. And in this way, he's attempting to gain more legitimacy for the throne. But Solomon figures out this ploy and has him executed. And also, he spares Abiathar the priest, who was part of the previous plot that for Adonijah, along with Joab, to get Adonijah to succeed the throne. So he spares Abiathar, and he has Joab slain. And Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, takes his place. And Shimei is given the directive, essentially not to leave Jerusalem, and to swear on oath that he won't leave Jerusalem. But he has a couple of servants who leave and attempt to go over to the Philistines. So Shimei goes and gets them back, but Solomon catches wind of it and has him executed as well. So Solomon certainly takes quick action here, establishing justice where David was often slow in executing justice. So I think a good indication of the care of justice in Solomon's reign. So, what is it? The proverb? And there's one proverb that says essentially that in justice a king's reign will be established. Okay, from Guzik here. I go the way of all the earth. David, son of Jesse, Israel's greatest king, apart from the Messiah, recognized that he was but a man and shared the common destiny of all the earth. Knowing he would soon pass from this life, David gave a final charge to Solomon. An expanded account of David's charge to Solomon is in 1 Chronicles 28 and 29, It especially emphasizes Solomon's duty to build the temple. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man. Perhaps David sensed some weakness in Solomon. Perhaps he knew Solomon would be tested in far greater ways than before. Whatever the exact reason was, David knew Solomon needed strength and courage. Great responsibilities require great strength and courage. From these words of David, we sense that Solomon faced great challenges, whether he knew it or not. The same expression was used by the Philistines in 1 Samuel 4:9, as they encouraged one another in their battle against what they assumed to be insurmountable odds. And keep the charge of the Lord your God. David also knew that Solomon could not be strong or courageous without obedient fellowship with God. In this place of obedient fellowship, Solomon would prosper in all that he did. That the Lord may fulfill his word which he spoke concerning me. David had a general reason to exhort Solomon to obedience, but he also had a specific reason, a specific promise of God. God promised David that as long as his sons walked in obedience, they would keep the throne of Israel. This was an amazing promise. No matter what the Assyrians or the Egyptians or the Babylonians did, as long as David's sons were obedient and followed God with all their heart and with all their soul, God would establish their kingdom. He would take care of the rest. We may envy the sons of David because they had such a promise, but we have a similar promise from God. Jesus said in Matthew 6:33, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you." God promises that if we put him first, he will take care of the rest. Do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. David wanted Solomon to begin his reign in justice, and to first give justice to Joab, who was guilty of the murder of both Abner, the general of Israel's army under Saul, and Amasa, one of David's military commanders. Joab is one of the more complex characters of the Old Testament. He was fiercely loyal to David, yet not strongly obedient. He disobeyed David when he thought it was in David's best interest, and he was cunning and ruthless in furthering his own position. David didn't mention Joab's killing of Absalom, which David commanded him not to do. Perhaps by this time, David recognized that Absalom did in fact have to die for his treason and attempted murder against David. Many people think that David did not command Joab's execution during his lifetime because Joab knew about the murder of Uriah, the husband of Bathsheba. The idea is that Joab used this knowledge as blackmail against David. This may be true, but it seems that others knew of David's sin with Bathsheba and against Uriah also, such as Nathan the prophet and servants in David's court. It would seem that Joab's knowledge was only effective as blackmail if no one else knew it. At the very least, David knew the complexity of Joab's character. He knew the loyalty and sacrifices Joab made for David over the years, and he knew his violence and ruthlessness. David felt under obligation to Joab, and though David was certainly not lacking in courage, he was not able to cope with a mixture of Joab's loyalty and his misdeeds. From Patterson and Austell. Show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite. David also wanted Solomon to do justice by those who had helped David in a time of great need. The sons of Barzillai himself, when David was fleeing from Absalom, provided grain and wine for the entire company of David as he was going out into the wilderness. Shimei, bring his gray hair. Prior to that, to eat at the king's table was the equivalent of having a pension. The beneficiary received a regular royal allowance of food and clothing, with a house and land to support him and his family. From Wiseman. Shimei, bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. David vowed that he would not kill the obnoxious rebel Shimei. It was right for David to keep his vow, but it was also right for him to make sure that Shimei received justice without David breaking his vow. And certainly as one who had a complaint against the house of David, in that Shimei viewed the house of David as illegitimate to the throne and as having wrongly taken the throne from the Benjaminites, Shimei himself being a Benjaminite. I would think that he would also be a thorn in the side of Solomon as well. David rested with his fathers. This phrase will become common throughout 1st and 2nd Kings to describe the passing of a king from this world. Truly, David passed from this life to eternal rest and reward. So ended the earthly life of one of the greatest men ever to walk the earth. So he died in a good old age, full of days and riches and honor. Of his adultery and murder we hear not a word, because he had made a thorough peace with God for those sins in his lifetime. From Trapp. He was a shepherd, a soldier, an outlaw, a king, a fugitive, a sinner, a saint, a poet. His experiences were the writing of God on his life, making him into a man after God's own heart. From Redpath. In general, he lived well, and it is most evident that he died well, and as a king, a general, a poet, a father, and a friend, he has had few equals, and no superior, from his own time to the present day. From Clark. And was buried in the city of David. The tomb of David was known in the time of Jesus, and the apostles, according to Acts 2:29. Afterwards, the Christian writer Jerome speaks of it being known in his time. What is currently known in Jerusalem as David's tomb is almost certainly not the genuine one that was known in ancient times. According to 2 Kings 11:10, David's weapons were preserved as relics in the sanctuary, while, according to Josephus, other representative treasures of his reign were buried with him in his tomb. From Dilday. Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. This is phrased to show that it was a fulfillment of the promise made to David in 2 Samuel 7, verses 12 through 16. That promise was ultimately fulfilled in Jesus, the son of David, but it also had a definite and partial fulfillment in Solomon. With Solomon began, in some senses, the most splendid period in Israel's history. The splendor, however, was largely mental and material. The spiritual is noticeably absent. From Morgan. Do you come peaceably? This was a valid question. Adonijah attempted to succeed David as king over Israel, but was kept from establishing his reign when Nathan and Bathsheba warned King David of Adonijah's attempt. Adonijah had reason to wish revenge on Bathsheba. You know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel had set their expectations on me that I should reign. Adonijah seemed to suffer from delusions of grandeur. He imagined that there was widespread popular support for him as a king. In reality, he only had a handful of influential malcontents to support him, and they quickly deserted him when it was evident that David favored Solomon. That he may give me Abishag the Shunammite as wife. In all likelihood, Abishag was a concubine of David's, and therefore legally bound to him. David's death broke that bond. And now Adonijah wanted to take the concubine widow, Abishag, as wife. We can surmise that Adonijah wanted more than Abishag's beauty. In 2 Samuel 16, verses 20 through 23, Absalom, the brother of Adonijah, asserted his rebellious claim on David's throne by taking David's concubines unto himself. Adonijah wants to declare or build a claim to Solomon's throne by taking David's widowed concubine as his wife. The idea has historical examples. Among the ancient Persians and Arabs, the new king took the harem of the previous king. Bathsheba therefore went to King Solomon. She knew that this was an outrageous request, yet she still agreed to bring it to Solomon. Bathsheba probably believed that it was best that Solomon knew what Adonijah wanted to do. One small petition. Bathsheba knew this was not a small petition at all. She was at least a little sarcastic. To make the request of Adonijah seems even more offensive to the ears of Solomon. Ask for him the kingdom also. Solomon understood the situation perfectly. He knew that this was Adonijah's attempt to declare or to build a claim to the throne of Israel. As the Lord lives, who has confirmed me and set me on the throne of David my father, Solomon was zealous to give justice to Adonijah, because he knew that God gave him the throne of Israel. Adonijah shall be put to death today. Solomon simply acted according to the term terms of parole he granted to Adonijah in 1 Kings 1:52. If he proves himself a worthy man, not one hair of him shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. Adonijah made a wicked, treasonous request, and is executed because of it. We wonder why Adonijah, after hearing the warning of Solomon made in 1 Kings 1:52, would make such an outrageous request. Perhaps he felt that Solomon was too young, too inexperienced, or too timid to do the right thing. He soon found out that Solomon was a wise and decisive leader. You are deserving of death. Abiathar deserved death because he supported Adonijah as the next king, in defiance of the will of God and the will of King David. This was treason against both God and the king of Israel. I will not put you to death at this time. Solomon showed mercy and wisdom to Abiathar. Mercy was shown in sparing Abiathar's life in light of his past standing as a chief priest and supporter of David. Wisdom was shown in exiling him and saying, I will not put you to death at this time. Solomon let Abiathar know that he could still be executed, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord, which he spoke concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. This refers to the prophecies found in 1 Samuel 2:27 and 36 and 1 Samuel 3:11 through 14. In removing Abiathar from the priesthood, Solomon, without direct intention, fulfilled the promise of judgment against the house of Eli, made some 100 years before Solomon took the throne. This judgment against Eli was essentially because of his sons. Because in verse 13 of 1 Samuel 3, for I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons make themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. And I think elsewhere, God essentially says to him that they won't hold the office for long. And the man of thine whom I shall not cut off from mine altar shall be to consume thine eyes, and to grieve thine heart, and all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. So, that fulfilling that, those subsequent to Eli won't hold their office for long. And Joab took hold of the horns of the altar. Joab supported Adonijah in his treasonous attempt to gain David's throne. Now he imitated Adonijah's attempt to find refuge by taking hold of the horns of the altar, as Adonijah did. He did not know where to fly, except he fled to the horns of an altar, which he had very seldom approached before. As far as we can judge, he had shown little respect to religion during his lifetime. He was a rough man of war, and cared little enough about God, or the tabernacle, or the priests, or the altar. But when he was in danger, he fled to that which he had avoided, and sought to make a refuge of that which he had neglected, from Spurgeon. The laying hold upon the literal horns of an altar, which can be handled, availed not Joab. There are many, oh how many still, that are hoping to be saved, because they lay hold, as they think, upon the horns of the altar by sacraments, from Spurgeon. Although it was almost a universal custom in the ancient world to find sanctuary at a holy altar, Solomon knew that this ancient custom was not used in Israel to protect a guilty man. But if a man acts with premeditation against his neighbor to kill him by treachery, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die. Since Joab refused to leave, Solomon had him executed right at the altar. It would have been an insult to justice not to have taken the life of Joab. David was culpable in delaying it so long, but probably the circumstances of his government would not admit of his doing it sooner, from Clark. Possibly, or it could just be that David was slack in justice, just in that he seemed to often, at least when his sons were concerned, delay justice. But upon David and his descendants, upon his house and his throne, there shall be peace forever from the Lord. This was only true as David's descendants followed the Lord. Our destiny is not determined by our ancestors, but by our current relationship with God. David reinforced this principle with Solomon earlier in this chapter by reminding him what the Lord promised. If your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Do not go out from there anywhere. Shimei was associated with the household of the former king Saul, and showed himself as a threat to the house of David. David instructed Solomon not to allow Shimei to die in peace. Solomon began dealing with Shimei by placing him under house arrest. This saying is good. Shimei knew that Solomon was merciful and generous to him. He not only agreed with the arrangement, he was also grateful for it. Why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I gave you? Solomon extended mercy to Shimei, but Shimei abused it and took advantage of it. It seems to have been a matter of neglect or forgetfulness, but it was criminal to neglect or forget a royal covenant. Thus the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. This chapter demonstrates that Solomon's throne was secure at an early date, not like the reign of David or Saul. This initial demonstration of justice was important for Solomon to perform. He seems to think that, while such bad men remained unpunished, the nation could not prosper, that it was an act of justice which God required him to perform in order to the establishment and perpetuity of his throne from Clark. It is interesting to compare his position now with that of his two predecessors, Saul and David. At the start of their reigns, both had faced a measure of suspicion or opposition from their own countrymen. Both had faced a measure of both had met this problem with resolute action, coupled with understanding and leniency. Solomon, however, eliminated his potential enemies swiftly and ruthlessly from pain. Oh, that we would be as quick in slaying our arch rebels, those predominant sins that threaten our precious souls from trap. And in chapter 3 here, Solomon made a treaty with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married Pharaoh's daughter. Marriage to fellow royalty was a common political strategy in the ancient world, and continues to the modern age. It was not only because royalty wanted to marry other royalty, but also because conflict between nations was then avoided for the sake of family ties. This was not Solomon's first marriage. 1 Kings 14:21 tells us that his son Rehoboam came to the throne when he was 41 years old, and 1 Kings 11:42 tells us that Solomon reigned 40 years. This means that Rehoboam was born to his mother, a wife of Solomon, named Naamah the Ammonitess, before he came to the throne, and before he married this daughter of Pharaoh. Solomon's multiple marriages and marriages to foreign women would cause great disaster in his life. Later in the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah was angry and frustrated because the people of Israel married with the pagan nations around them. In rebuking the guilty, Nehemiah remembered Solomon's bad example. From Nehemiah 13:25 and 27, so I contended with them and cursed them, struck some of them, and pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, You shall not give your daughters as wives to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons for yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations there was no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, pagan women caused even him to sin. Should we then hear of you doing all this great evil, transgressing against our God, by marrying pagan women? The foreign wives made Solomon more than a bad example. They ruined his spiritual life. But King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, You shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. Solomon clung to these in love. and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines. And his wives turned away his heart. For it was so, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. From 1 Kings 11, verses 1 through 4. 1 Kings 11:4 says this only happened when Solomon was old, but the pattern was set with his first marriage to the Egyptian princess. It perhaps made political sense, but not spiritual sense. Such arranged marriages were a common confirmation of international treaties, but this one was the beginning of Solomon's spiritual downfall. From Wiseman. 2 Samuel 3:3 tells us that David married the daughter of a foreign king, Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. Marrying a foreign woman was not against the law of Moses, if she became a convert to the God of Israel. What did not ruin David did ruin Solomon. Yeah, but I would also say that David's sin here was that he gathered for himself many wives. And rather than listening to the command of the Lord and only choosing one wife for himself, he married multiple women, thus enabling his sons to follow his example. And so you have, in the case of Solomon, him following it to an extreme. Solomon brought her to the city of David. Though this was permitted under the law of Moses, it was not wise or good for Solomon to do this. Later in his life, his foreign wives were the reason his heart turned away from the Lord. Old legends from Jewish rabbis say that on their wedding night, the Egyptian princess cast a spell on Solomon and put a tapestry over their bed that looked like the night sky with stars and constellations. The spell was intended to make Solomon sleep, and when he did wake, he looked up and thought the stars were still out and it was still night, so he went back to sleep. He slept on past 10 in the morning, and all Israel was grieved because Solomon kept the keys to the temple under his pillow, and they couldn't have the morning sacrifice until he woke up. Finally, his mother Bathsheba roused him from sleep. Cited in Ginsburg. Interesting. Well, Jewish folklore aside, the fact that Solomon gathered many wives for himself ultimately led to the kingdom being ripped from him, and a great schism happening between Israel and Judah, and a more personal schism between him and God. Anyhow, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.